Tatters lets go. In the instant before gravity kicks in, she turns her focus inwards. She connects with that part of herself that, in turn, connects with the wider fabric of the universe and visualizes the parting of reality. Such a simple thing when immersed in the enormity of the arcane to connect two nearby points. She opens the smoke-shrouded tear beneath her and falls into it, reappearing almost instantly on the floor of the chamber far below, close to the door, amidst a swirling cloud of turbulent purple. Ready to flee, she looks up to see the shocked faces of the bluecoats at the edge of the collapsed floor, trying to make sense of what they have just seen. What they are still seeing. Because up above her, something is deeply wrong. The rift she had opened to access the demon dimensions has not closed. Something is holding it open, some malevolent will that seeks to counter her own efforts to close it. The wound inexistent bulges grotesquely as if under tremendous pressure, and a mass of writhing tentacles burst through, reaching out hungrily for the bulge-eyed blues. Tatters arrests her flight, turns, and redoubles her efforts to force it closed. Veins stand out in her neck, and she can sense the toll this magical contest is having on her. But her will is greater. Inexorably, she begins to overwhelm the alien, cancerous mind that pits itself against her. With a sudden snap, the tear collapses in on itself, severing those vile, wriggling appendages cleanly off and causing them to fall about her like cephalopodic rain. Then, with the horrified cries of the blues at her back, she runs. Hello and welcome to The Lone Adventurer, an actual play solo RPG podcast with me, Carl White. I will be your narrator, your game master, and your guide as we follow our heroes on their journey into the unknown. For this game, I will be using the Chasing Adventure rule set, as well as a variety of other systems, tools, and tables as they take my fancy. A word of warning. The following scenes may contain mature themes and disturbing imagery. Listener discretion is advised. The adventure continues. Last time on The Lone Adventurer. Tatters' infiltration of the Mustang resulted in her stumbling over an unexpected discovery. Amidst a running battle playing out between vampires and the Bluecoats, she encountered a group of vampires torturing a near-dead Inquisitor Fonseca of the Enlightenment for information. The implications were startling. If Fonseca had survived the collapse of the Opera House, might that mean that there was still hope for the rest of the web? She resolved to find out, but was interrupted by the arrival of a Bluecoat squad. In the ensuing battle, Tatters' bid to reach Fonseca failed when the floor gave way beneath her. Now, with her target in the hands of the Blues, she has no choice but to return to the plan that brought her to this cursed place, to find Lord Tortimus. We've talked in Chapter 7 about the danger of making the Evoke Spell move in Chasing Adventure. This is a nice mechanism. It imposes potential consequences for calling on mystic powers, which feels very thematic and helps to drive the story forward. Last time, when Tatters teleported, she got a 7 to 9 result, and so I chose the option, using it puts you in danger or draws unwanted attention. The GM will say how. This time, I decided I wanted to try something different, and so I combined the other two possible consequences for narrative purposes, and then selected one of them. The first option, when you cast a spell and get a mixed success, is for the spell's risk to manifest. Each spell in Chasing Adventure comes with an associated risk, and in the case of teleport, the risk is something from the demon dimensions slips out of the rip you made in reality. It's worth mentioning, by the way, that the teleport spell doesn't actually exist in the Chasing Adventure Wizard playbook, and so I wrote my own spell along with the associated risk and greater effect. More on greater effects if they come into play. Tatters had a choice here. She could have let those demonic tentacles burst through and massacre the Bluecoats. But she's a pretty conscientious character when it comes down to it, I think, and so I had her fight back against that option. The goal here was to foreshadow the spell's risk, rather than manifest it. And so I went instead for option 2, which reads, the spell's magic drains you. You take -1 ongoing to evoke spells until you next settle in. That means that from now on until the next time that Tatters gets a proper rest and recovery time, every spell she casts will be cast at +1 rather than at +2. That's not great news for her, and a development that is likely to make her even more reluctant to release her magic. On the plus side, she's disentangled herself from the Bluecoats for now, so let's see how she fares with her main mission. Tatters' mind is spinning, her heart pounding as she ventures deeper into the labyrinthine depths of the crashed casino skyship. Adrenaline courses through her as she tries and fails to slow her ragged breathing. If only she could have reached that damned Inquisitor. What secrets could he have whispered? What hope might he have restored? Set against that desideratum is the stark terror engendered by the near failure of her magical control. Had her attention slipped? Had she failed to pay close enough attention to the patterns in the fabric when she had made her incision, and inadvertently cut into a demonic cyst? That thought is troubling enough, but the alternative is even worse. What if that dark, monstrous consciousness that had sought to break through had been in some way orchestrated against her? A deliberate attack? Might she have attracted the attention of something beyond the veil? Or potentially worse still, could this be the work of her own patron, the demon Satara? It has already placed her in mortal peril to serve its own ends, and even seized control of her physical form. Is this what comes next, turning her own magic against her? The stillness down here feels heavy, almost suffocating. Her heart pounds in her chest, each beat a hammer blow in the oppressive quiet. "Calm yourself," she mutters under her breath, the words an oft-repeated mantra. "Slow your mind. Focus on what you can control. Ignore everything else." But remembering who taught her those words, and what she might have lost, pulls her back into the spiral of uncontrollable thoughts. She reaches a pristine, carpeted corridor, untouched by the destruction elsewhere. The polished, panelled walls, smooth and unblemished, gleam softly under faint, ambient light. As she nears the end of the corridor, she comes to an uncertain halt. The air feels somehow too calm, the silence too perfect. Something's wrong. She notices subtle, almost imperceptible changes. Shadows lengthening unnaturally, the temperature dropping, and a faint metallic taste on her tongue. The light, without appearing to have changed at any point, is now dim to the point of darkness. She raises a hand to her temple, pain flaring at the dissonance between what she sees and what she feels. She senses something, a presence she's not felt since. And just like that, she knows what this sensation represents. "Lord Tortimus!" she cries out, turning slowly in place. "I know you're here. I've come here at great personal risk to talk with you, to talk on behalf of the web." There is no reply, nothing save the stultifying stillness. Pushing uncertainty aside, she presses on. "I think we have common enemies, you and I I think we each have information that would be useful to the other. I seek parley with you, Prince of the Undying, and should that parley serve us both, perhaps even an alliance. Will you speak with me?" From inches behind her left ear comes a velvet whisper, carrying within its mellifluous tones equal parts piqued interest, insouciant amusement, and deadly malice. "I will." Okay, strap in. This is going to be a long one. The Vampire Lord makes a return thanks to a mythic altered scene. In this case, my GM informed me that this scene alteration involved setting up an immediate danger, with the descriptor threateningly normal. I asked, "Does this feel like Tortimus's concealing magic?" and the GM confirmed that it did. Instead of Tatters hunting for her quarry, Tatters had found her quarry. From there, I had Tatters make a compel move, which reads, "When you use favour, payment, promises or threats to get someone to do something, say what you want them to do, or not to do, and roll plus charisma." I rolled, and for what I think is actually the very first time in this storyline, Tatters got a straight success. That means that the NPC does what she wants. She gets her chinwag with the bloodsucker. And so, with Lord Tortimus back on the scene, and seemingly about to enter into dialogue, it's time to flesh him out a little with my handy canoe personality mapper. By his consciousness, agreeableness, neuroticism, openness, and extroversion shall we know him. Although, before we get into that, I should mention that I've had a change of heart on the name of this tool. Here's my reasoning. According to Freud's psychodynamic theory, there are three aspects to the human psyche: the unconscious, the preconscious, and the conscious minds. While many aspects of Freud's work are contested today, this model remains extremely influential and is broadly accepted. The conscious mind contains all of the thoughts, memories, feelings, and wishes of which we are aware at any given moment. This is the aspect of our mental processing that we can think and talk about rationally. This also includes our memory, which is not always part of our consciousness, but can be retrieved easily enough and brought back into awareness. Let us imagine that this conscious mind is an island. It is a comparatively small island, but it's well mapped, and sure and stable underfoot. The preconscious mind consists of anything that could potentially be brought into the conscious mind. We can imagine this as the shoreline of our mind, a liminal, magical space halfway between the conscious and the unconscious. Among other things, lucid dreaming, deep daydreaming, or meditation can help us enter this state of consciousness. The unconscious mind is the deep reservoir of our feelings, thoughts, drives, and memories that sit outside of our conscious awareness. The unconscious contains, and is the source of, all of our basic instincts and urges. It is at the root of who we are, a product of our unconscious processes and drives, a key factor in the shaping of our personality traits. This, then, is the ocean, the vast, unplumbed depths within which the core of each of us lies. Our 5 personality traits are born from the mysteries that lie below our surface. So, what does all this psychobabble have to do with my Canoe NPC personality model, I hear you ask? Well, simply this. Canoe is an anagram of ocean. By rearranging the personality traits to read openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, we come up with a new name for the tool that is far better linked to the subject matter it describes than a name I originally selected because it reminded me of a mildly rude joke. With all of that out of the way, let's explore Tortimus's ocean profile. O for openness. I see Tortimus as being an extremely imaginative and insightful character, and something of a polymath. Adventurousness, creativity, and curiosity all fit my image of him. I'm going to call this a 5. C, conscientiousness. A solid 4 here, I think. As we've seen in his takeover of the Silver Nails, Tortimus is clearly a planner and decisive actor. E for extroversion, that's a 3. Tortimus is neither gushing extrovert nor reserved wallflower. A, agreeableness, a 2. Although he's very well spoken, everything we know of him shows him to be pretty ruthless. Not exactly empathic or emotionally intelligent, our vampire lord. And N, neuroticism. I've no idea on this one, and so I decided to roll for it and got a 4. Mood swings, sadness, emotional instability are all part of his makeup. Tortimus is living up to the brooding emo goth vampire stereotype. That means that Tortimus is a 5, 4, 3, 2, 4. Useful to know, but I think we can go a stage further. Behavior involves an interaction between a person's underlying personality traits and their situational variables. The situation that someone finds themselves in plays a role in how they might react to any new circumstance. However, in most cases, people offer responses that remain consistent with their underlying personality traits. We already have our 5 root personality traits measured, but in addition to these we can also abstract the situational variables into 2 further numbers, again ranked from 1 to 5. The first represents the NPC's disposition to the PC, or PCs, from negative to positive, and the second represents their core disposition. Unlike the personality traits, these numbers can be adjusted up or down over time depending on changing narrative circumstances. So that is an I for interpersonal and a C for core to add to our ocean. I hereby christen this mechanic the Oceanic NPC Emulator. In the case of Lord Tortimus, I don't really know what those last 2 numbers are, and so I decide to roll for them. However, circumstances suggest he is at least neutral in disposition towards Tatters on the web, and so I decide to put my thumb on the scales a bit and roll that dice with advantage. That is, I roll 2d10, take the highest, and halve the number to get a score between 1 and 5. And for Tortimus, his interpersonal disposition is a 3, neutral. Given that he's dealing with a crashed headquarters and an all-out war against half of Kyrus, which he seems to be losing, I'm going to roll his core disposition score at disadvantage, which gives me a 1. Tortimus is not a happy camper. So, how could we use this understanding of our 7 traits to model an NPC's behavior? For those 7 numbers to be useful as predictors of what the Vampire Lord might do or say, we might just imagine how they combine and write dialogue accordingly. But, as I've said before, a big part of the fun of a solo RPG can be unpredictability. And in order to maintain that sense of uncertainty as the player of the game, what I want is a mechanism for turning these numbers into conversation or action. An Oceanic NPC behavior emulator. Here's how it works. I roll 7d6, 1 die paired to each trait, looking for matches. In this case, I get a match for conscientiousness, extroversion, and core disposition. From there, I read the tea leaves, interpreting what this combination of traits might mean in the context of my story and Tortimus's scores in these 3 traits. His planning, ruthlessness, and fury over his circumstances all combine to suggest action rather than words in this case. He is planning a counterattack. Of course, I could have ended up rolling no matches at all, and in fact there's a pretty good chance of that outcome. Roughly 35% from my crude dice rolling test, and exactly 27.9% from my mathematical prodigy friend Russell's calculations. Thank you, Russell. Those instances where there is no match indicate something else is at play, some external preoccupation that the NPC brings up that is not particularly linked to their personality. In these cases, I count up the number of 6s rolled to determine the degree of complication, twist, or difficulty that this represents for the PC, and then ask a complex question of my oracle to get a sense of the nature of it. 0 6s represent something utterly trivial, perhaps some inconsequential small talk. At the other end of the spectrum, 7 sixes, an almost vanishingly small chance, means that this NPC has something genuinely monumental or earth-shattering to say, at least in terms of impact to the PC. This is my very first trial of this NPC emulator, so let's see how it behaves. Tatters spins and looks up into the handsome, urbane features of the Night Queen's consort, Lord Tortimus of the Undying. The man, if such he can be called, is tall, elegant and silver-haired, his red eyes burning in a moon-pale face, with a smile that falls somewhere between that of a bored aesthete and a predator's promise of savage, blood-drenched death. Suddenly, all the words she had prepared die on her lips. She is down here, alone in the dark, with possibly the most dangerous creature she has ever encountered. Standing here, so close to him, she is suddenly and painfully aware of how utterly inhuman Tortimus really is. He may be beautiful, but he's unmistakably a monster. She is dimly aware that he is not even breathing. "Cat got your tongue, Miss Kamadev?" Tortimus's smile grows wider, and from behind her she hears a low, rumbling sound, somewhere between a purr and a growl. She feels something huge circling her legs and, daring a glance down, spies sleek, purple-black fur and rippling feline muscle. "But perhaps you're right," Tortimus continues in a conversational tone entirely at odds with the aura of dread he so effortlessly exudes. "This is hardly the place, and we do have more pressing matters to attend to first." His features harden, as if giving some unseen signal, and in the distance Tatters can faintly make out an unsettling sound, like the scuttling of 10,000 beetles growing swiftly closer. Tortimus extends his hands above him, and a faint crimson glow emanates from his fingertips. With a whispered incantation, the vampire lord's eyes burn brighter still, and as he drops his arms, he describes a perfect circle in the air before him. The blood-red circle begins to pulse with energy, and intricate, eldritch runes etch themselves around its shimmering border, their lines twisting and interlocking into patterns that seem almost alive. The air grows ever colder. As the runes reach their full brilliance, the center of the circle begins to ripple, as if reality itself is being subverted. The corridor's long shadows are drawn like smoke into the circle, swirling and converging into a dark vortex. Tatters recoils as the portal begins to emit a low, haunting hum, faint echoes of the death cries of countless souls that have been sacrificed to fuel its creation. Tortimus reaches for Tatters' slack, unresisting hand and steps with her into the circle, their forms dissolving into the shadows. The scuttling sound grows in volume and intensity, and within moments, scores of vampire spawn are pouring into the corridor, flinging themselves, one after another, into the dread portal. When, at last, the final one is through, there is nothing but silence. After a few moments, a metal canister, perhaps a foot in length and a third of that in diameter, rolls out of the portal's gathered darkness and comes to rest with a dull clunk against a wall. In the distance, the approaching triumphal shouts of the bluecoats can be heard. The portal remains in place for a moment, its edges shimmering with dark energy, before it collapses in on itself, leaving the corridor empty and silent once more. And then, minute runes flare into life about the canister's circumference. At one end, a lid begins slowly to unscrew itself. Ink-black shadows begin to hiss from the ever-widening crack, spectral remnants of tormented souls taking horrifying form. there seems to be no end to them. It is a few minutes after that the screaming begins. As it turned out, we got no further than that single roll on my NPC behavior generator. I knew from the first oceanic roll that Tauntamus planned some sort of counterattack, but not what it was. And so I asked the virtual GM about the nature of his plans, and I got this enigmatic response: confined ruins. This, after a moment's thought, seemed simple enough. One way or another, this downed skyship would be sealed off and become the Bluecoat's tomb. To find out how, I asked a follow-up question. Could Tauntamus teleport away to safety? Yes, said my GM, and he can take his remaining vampires with him. From that point onward, the how of the counterattack didn't really matter. It was just window dressing, and something I could safely make up without pestering the GM. Tauntamus was going to teleport out, seal the exits, and then drop in the equivalent of nerve gas through the portal and let all of the blues die like rats in a trap. In keeping with the Undying's undead theme, I figured a tube of endless wraiths would probably do the trick. And so here we are, with the cream of Kyros's brave boys in blue wiped out, our hero in the very uncertain company of a ruthless and deadly vampire lord, and no idea at all what comes next. Just the way I like it. Before I go, just a quick word on the game system I'm using for this portion of the story. As I've mentioned before, the choice of game system has a big impact on the nature of the story that emerges. Ironsworn Starforged creates travelling quest tales. Blades in the Dark centres around heists and ramps up the tension as each heist nears its climax. My sense of chasing adventure so far is that it's perfect for the sort of action-adventure story that I want to explore at the moment. As the opening line of the rulebook states, chasing adventure is a game about action and drama, tension and payoff, victory and tragedy. I think that's pretty accurate. The rules are light enough to get out of my way and let me do the fun stuff, but there's enough structure there to help me when I need it. There is a genuine sense of imminent consequence that I love about Powered by the Apocalypse games, and this one seems to be doing a great job of capturing that element. Each roll is a nail-biter and has the potential to drive the story in new, unexpected directions. There are several subsystems I've yet to explore. Favour, followers, tags, assets, settling in, and ominous forces are all things that are in the rules that have yet to be touched on, but all in good time. Actually, the biggest one we've yet to see is combat. It occurs to me that in 3 episodes of play, we have yet to see a straightforward fight scene. Given that Tatters is alone, that's probably a good thing, and the fact that her character design, the narrative, my choices, and the game mechanics have all combined to allow that to happen reflects well on this game system. Mechanically, things are actually going pretty well for Tatters so far. She's yet to pick up any additional conditions, beyond the locked-in haunted condition that gives her disadvantage to wisdom rolls. Admittedly, she has taken that ding to her spellcasting ability, but it's still at a +1. Not the end of the world. Fingers crossed that her good fortune continues because, unlike in D&D for example, conditions are the only real resource in chasing adventure. If she can keep from getting damaged, she can keep on casting spells and making progress for as long as she likes. Of course, there is the small matter of a vampire lord, a civil war, killer cultists, and a genocidal bombing campaign still to deal with, but I'm sure it'll all work out for the best. In the meantime, I'm going to make one final move, the end of session move. After 3 episodes, this feels like a natural place for me to take this move. It says, at the end of each session, answer the following question and mark 1 XP for each yes answer. Firstly, did we discover something new and important about the world or the characters? I think the discovery that Fonseca is alive is pretty significant. Second, did we newly visit or significantly alter a memorable location? Well, yes, I think the visit to the Mustang qualifies. And thirdly, did we overcome a notable obstacle, enemy, or challenge? I'm on the fence on this one. I could argue that the challenge was to secure a talk with Tortimus, but that feels a bit thin, particularly in light of the fourth and final XP source, so I'm going to say no to this one. Lastly, gain 1 XP if you accomplished your drive. Tatters' drive reads, advance the web's agenda or avoid deterioration in the relationship with Satara. I'll give her 1 XP for that, which leaves her at 5 XP in total. That's enough for her to level up, but to do that, she would need to take the settle in move, which I'm not ready to do just yet. So I'll bank the XP for now, and wait to see what happens next. I hope you'll join me to find out. Next time. You have been listening to The Lone Adventurer, a solo RPG podcast played, written and performed by me, Carl White. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider telling your friends about it or leaving a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. It really is a huge help. You can email me at theloneadv@gmail.com or follow my blog at carlillustration.wordpress.com. You can find show notes for this episode and all the others at theloneadventurer.podbean.com, where I include any links mentioned in the episode, as well as mechanics information. I also include a link to a full episode transcript. The story will continue in the next episode of The Lone Adventurer. Thank you for listening.